A disturbing story out of Southwest Florida. A man found living in a home with a decomposing body inside.
And deputies called the woman's death suspicious. Louis is in our newsroom with the details on this one. Louis.
Pretty gruesome story. Deputies in Charlotte County were called for a wellness check, and they found the man inside the home with the body of a woman who apparently had been dead for days.
A case shook Charlotte County, Florida, and stunned the community when news broke about the investigation of Justin Carver, a 36-year-old man accused of failing to inform authorities about the death of his own mother, Layni Carver, aged 55. The case began to unravel when Charlotte County officers were called for a welfare check at a residence on Turback Drive in Punta Gorda, Florida, on the 5th of May. What they found next was deeply disturbing for everyone present, except for Justin, who appeared completely unaffected by the situation. However, the story behind this case is even more shocking, and we recommend watching until the end of the video. We would also love to hear your thoughts in the comments. That day, at around 5 p.m, deputies from the sheriff's office arrived at the house following concerns from neighbours about the silence and lack of activity around the property. From the outset, something seemed terribly wrong. After knocking several times with no response, the officers began to inspect the perimeter of the house and soon noticed a foul odour coming from within, along with multiple flies gathered around the windows and doors. This raised the officers' suspicions, prompting them to conduct a more detailed inspection. One of the officers noticed a movement inside the house and approached a rear window. From there, he could see a white man dressed in a plain t-shirt and black Crocs sandals, seemingly asleep on a bed. The officer tried to get his attention, tapping on the window, and eventually the man woke up, reacting in a confused manner. This man was Justin Carver. Upon getting up, he exited the house through a side door, which he promptly closed and locked. Carver's evasive behaviour, along with his bewildered expression, aroused the officers' suspicions, leading them to question him about the situation at the house and the whereabouts of his mother, the person they had initially been called to check on.
When was the last time you saw her?
A few days ago.
Where'd she go?
She just went to the store and said she'd be back in a little while.
In response to the questions, Carver exhibited an apathetic and distant attitude. When the officers asked him when he had last seen his mother, Justin vaguely replied that it had been earlier in the week, though he seemed unable to recall the exact day. His answer only heightened the officers' suspicions, as they couldn't help but notice that Justin showed signs of nervousness and avoided eye contact. Moreover, the strong odour still emanating from the house reinforced their theory that something extremely serious had happened. When the officers attempted to enter the home, Carver tried to block their way, claiming he didn't have a key to the front door.
You can lead the way if you're so pleased.
I kind of locked the door.
You could go in, but you could go in. Just lead us through.
Yeah.
Kind of locked.
Do you have a key?
No.
Why would you lock the door behind you?
I just usually do that.
So how do you get in?
However, this statement created an obvious contradiction. If Carver had exited the house moments earlier, how could he now lack a way to re-enter? Faced with this inconsistency, the officer pressed Carver for an answer, but the man remained silent. Finally, under pressure, Carver pointed to another side door, which he said was broken, explaining that it had been left in that condition due to a previous incident. The officers seized this opportunity to enter the house while Carver waited outside with another officer. Once inside, they encountered a chilling scene. In one of the bedrooms, lying on the floor near the bed, was the body of Layni Carver in an advanced state of decomposition. The skin on the body had started to swell and become mottled, and in some areas it was peeling due to the natural decomposition process. This disturbing sight confirmed the officers' worst fears. Layni Carver had been dead in her home for several days, without anyone reporting her death. Following the discovery of the body, the officer immediately exited the residence and proceeded to arrest Justin Carver. After reading him his Miranda rights, the officers attempted to obtain some explanation from him as to why he had not reported his mother's death or even sought help. Despite the questions, Carver maintained his blank expression and evasive attitude, a response that left the officers bewildered. During the initial interrogation, Justin revealed a key detail. His mother had obtained a no-contact order against him. This legal measure suggested that the relationship between Justin and Layni was at best complicated and tense. The no-contact order was intended to protect Layni from any potential confrontation or violence from her son, indicating a history of conflict between the two. Yet, despite the order, Justin was residing in the same house at the time of his arrest, a clear violation of legal provisions. When asked about the strong odour emanating from the house, Carver admitted he had noticed it days earlier, but inexplicably, he had done nothing about it. The officers continued pressing him for a logical explanation as to why, after finding his mother's lifeless body in an advanced state of decomposition, he hadn't called the authorities. Justin simply shrugged and responded with a cold, "I don't know," leaving the officers bewildered.
So why didn't you call law enforcement when you found her deceased? You don't know?
This apparent indifference to the situation raised concern, and for some even suspicion that Carver might be hiding something deeper about the events leading to his mother's death. For the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office, the circumstances surrounding the case warranted a thorough investigation. Officers began gathering additional evidence at the residence and in the surrounding area, including interviews with neighbours, to shed light on the background of the mother-son relationship. Testimonies from some local residents described Layni Carver as a kind but reserved woman who didn't have many close friends and spent most of her time at home. Her relationship with Justin, however, was known by some community members to be troubled. News of the case quickly spread across local and national media, sparking a wave of shock and disbelief. How could a son remain in the same house as his mother's corpse and do nothing about it? Questions about Justin Carver's mental health began to surface in public opinion, along with doubts about his true intentions. The image of a man who had apparently lived alongside a corpse for several days, without showing any reaction or even attempting to mask the smell, captured the attention of both the media and the community. With Justin now in custody, the authorities announced that they would work to bring the case to court and establish any relevant legal responsibilities. The next hearing was scheduled for the 24th of May, where Carver was expected to face the charges and provide some kind of explanation before the court. Meanwhile, Charlotte County remained in a state of anticipation, with Layni's neighbours and relatives waiting for the mystery surrounding her death to be resolved and for clarity on the role Justin Carver played in this dark episode. As the case progressed, investigators sought to understand Justin Carver's motivations for not reporting his mother's death. Carver's apathetic response during the initial interrogation was only the beginning of a complex legal process in which, despite the apparent simplicity of the crime, the situation posed several questions. The preliminary autopsy of Layni Carver revealed that she had died several days before being found, meaning her body had been decomposing while Justin continued living in the same house. Authorities disclosed further details about the evidence found at the residence. The condition of the body and the surroundings suggested that no one had attempted to clean or even disguise the scene, a fact that reinforced the impression of disinterest and neglect that officers had observed in Carver from the start. However, Justin's lack of intervention remained a mystery. He hadn't even attempted to cover up the situation or dispose of the body, as seen in other cases we've covered in previous videos on our channel. In his statement to investigators, Carver offered details that were confusing and unconvincing. He claimed that, upon discovering his mother's body, he experienced a kind of mental block and didn't know what to do. He argued that he had been in a state of shock that prevented him from acting rationally. However, the time that had passed, and his ability to continue with daily activities without contacting the authorities, largely contradicted this claim. During the investigation, officers examined the Carver family's background. They discovered that Layni had requested the no-contact order after a series of incidents in which Justin had shown aggressive and erratic behaviour. According to neighbours and acquaintances, Layni had tried to lead a quiet life and had expressed concern about her son's unstable behaviour on several occasions. Although this context did not prove a direct criminal act, it provided a backdrop of tensions that could explain the distant and strained relationship between mother and son. With the accumulation of evidence, county prosecutors began preparing a strategy for presenting the case in court. At this stage, their main objective would be to demonstrate Justin's extreme negligence in failing to report Layni's death, an act that could be considered a crime under certain jurisdictions, particularly if it is determined that his inaction caused emotional suffering or contributed to the deterioration of the scene's conditions. Carver's defense, on the other hand, argued that Justin's psychological state had rendered him unable to respond appropriately, requesting a psychiatric evaluation to shed light on his behavior. In response, prosecutors presented experts who argued that, even in a state of shock, Justin's behavior was abnormal. A key point discussed was Justin's ability to continue with normal activities in the days following his mother's death, indicating that he was not in a state of paralysis or incapacity, but rather one of extreme indifference. Meanwhile, the case continued to generate extensive media coverage. The public began questioning the failures within the family and social system that could have prevented such a tragic situation. Could adult protection services have intervened earlier to protect Layni from her son, given the history of issues? Were there prior warning signs that neighbours or friends might have overlooked? The case seemed to reflect not only an isolated crime, but also potential gaps in support for vulnerable individuals in situations of domestic conflict. On the 24th of May, Justin Carver appeared before the court in a preliminary hearing where the charges against him were read. The courtroom was packed with journalists, family members, and community members who wanted to see the man who had left his mother without help for days. The prosecution presented a summary of the initial findings, including forensic evidence and the condition of Layni's body. The arguments focused on proving that, while Justin had not physically caused his mother's death, his indifference towards her passing and failure to notify authorities constituted a form of criminal negligence. Justin's defense requested that the judge consider the possibility of a psychological evaluation for their client before proceeding with a formal trial. They argued that Carver's behavior indicated signs of untreated mental health issues, possibly a form of psychosis or severe emotional disorder that had left him unable to make rational decisions at the time. Justin's lawyers insisted that his unusual reaction might be explained by an underlying mental disorder. The judge accepted the petition and ordered a comprehensive psychiatric evaluation of Justin Carver to determine his mental state at the time of the events. This examination could be crucial in establishing whether Carver was aware of his actions and the consequences of his inaction, which would influence the type of charges he might face. If it were demonstrated that he had a disorder that prevented him from making coherent decisions, the defense could argue for diminished criminal responsibility. However, if he was deemed to have acted consciously and voluntarily, then the charge of criminal negligence could proceed with greater weight. The legal process continued to move forward, yet the mystery surrounding Justin Carver remained unresolved. For the community of Punta Gorda, Layni Carver's case became a reminder of the importance of early intervention in family conflict situations, as well as the need for a stronger support network for those living in vulnerable conditions. Layni's family and friends expressed their sorrow at the loss of a woman who, though reserved, deserved a dignified end, and the compassion of those close to her. The words of a close friend of Layni's resonated through various local media outlets. No one deserves to be alone in their final moments, much less be left forgotten in their own home. With the psychiatric evaluation underway, authorities continued gathering evidence and preparing their arguments for trial. Expectations were high, and media pressure added an extra layer of complexity to the case. Justin Carver's trial would not only determine his responsibility for his mother's death, but also society's stance towards indifference and neglect in critical family situations. As the judicial proceedings unfolded, public opinion was divided into two positions. Those who believed Carver was guilty of a morally reprehensible act by ignoring his mother's death, and those who, on the other hand, felt the man was affected by mental health issues that drove him to act irrationally. This latter group argued that while the case was tragic, it also highlighted a lack of access to mental health services for individuals with a history of problematic behaviour. Thus, as the court deliberated and awaited the psychiatric evaluation report, Justin Carver's case continued to raise questions about the boundary between moral and legal responsibility in cases of neglect. The coming months will be crucial in clarifying the true nature of his actions and the role of mental health in interpreting his case. What's your stance on this case? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and join our community to stay up to date on this case. See you in the next video.